Hello! Hello, chat! How are we all doing today? I know I said that I wouldn't be streaming until I got a PC, but I realized that it won't take as much CPU. Like, it doesn't take as much CPU to stream me reading fanfiction, so. And I'm getting my new PC tomorrow, but I wanted to fit in one more stream before doing so. So that's what this is. I found another fanfiction by Bones and the Bees called The Stars and Their Children, I think. And we're going to be reading that today. If you're new to the stream, be sure to leave a follow if you enjoy this content, because there's going to be a lot more content. More than just the occasional Minecraft and fanfiction readings. In case you don't follow me on Twitter, I did say that the first thing that I'm going to do when getting a PC is streaming Monster Prom and or Monster Camp. That also depends on how much they cost on Steam, actually. Because if they cost a lot, I'm just going to be streaming Monster Prom. I am a college student, after all. I have to be a little bit wary about what I spend. I say as I buy a lot of streamer merch. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. Alright, let's get into it, shall we? Also, just to save some CPU, I'm not going to be doing the usual a video that I do of like the copyright-free lo-fi, because so on Spotify, what I'm listening to is the album Crystallized by Jordan Lorette. Is there any way that I can... Oh wait, no, it's not Crystallized. That's her single. A Ghost Girl's Isolation. Let's see. Let me paste it in chat real quick. If you want to check out the album, she's incredibly talented, and I highly recommend you listen to her music. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, we're still in the green. That's a good sign. This is a pretty long chapter. It might just be another just one chapter thing. Okay, I went over the tags and the summary and stuff before going live. Sorry, that was a burp. That was disgusting. But I'm just gonna read them to you real quick. Characters: Wilbur Soot, Tommy Innit, Nikki, Phil Watson, Technoblade, Tebo, Rambu, Aimsy. Wait, Aimsy's in this. Eret and Dream. Additional tags: alternate universe, space, royalty. Wilbur Soot and Tommy Innit are siblings. Phil Watson is not Tommy Innit's parent. Phil Watson is not Wilbur Soot's parent. Politics, science fiction, Wilbur Soot-centric. Wilbur Soot is not okay. Wilbur Soot needs a hug. Brotherly love, family dynamics, hurt/comfort, fluff and angst, traumatized Wilbur Soot, traumatized Tommy Innit, complicated relationships, dysfunctional family, outer space, dark sleepy boys Inc., but not like in the possessive way, inspired by Dune, but not an AU of it. Now, I've never seen Dune, so I'm basically going into this blind. This was updated yesterday, actually. And it's not finished yet. But we'll see. We'll see how this goes. Because I'm still waiting for Chapter 9 of Nocturnal Animals. But Bones and the Beast is very busy, and so I would bet that, like, especially with working on other things, you know? Alright. The Stars and Their Children. Summary. Yes, Wilbur had to bite his tongue to keep the answer from... wait. Yes. Wilbur had to bite his tongue to keep the answer from spilling out of his mouth. But yes, he wanted more. Of course he wanted more. He wanted to be more than the bastard prince. He wanted to be more than a mistake his mother made before she married Tommy's father. But that wasn't the role he had been cast for in his life. It doesn't matter, Wilbur said instead. When Tommy turns 18, he'll be crowned king, and I will be his advisor. He'll be a good king. I'll make sure of it. Or, as the bastard prince of the planet of Eldenveger, Wilbur has always known he was never meant for greatness. That was his younger brother's destiny. Wilbur's job was simply to try and make sure Tommy could fulfill that destiny. That becomes decidedly more difficult when the brothers are betrayed and are forced to flee their home planet. With the Asempi Empire being one of the largest imperial powers in the universe, the only place that can offer them refuge from Emperor Dream is Zephys 4, capital planet of the Antarctic Empire, ruled by the ruthless Emperor Philza. Also, I feel like this is supposed to be pronounced SMP, but fuck you, I'm making it SMP because that sounds cooler. AKA Space Royalty AU. Any trigger warnings? None so far. Chapter 1. Sing to me, muse, of a boy of many turns. Hey, Will, can you hand me the Epley? Wilbur glanced down at the bowl of fruit sitting in front of him, his eyes skimming over the bright red skin of the Epley that sat on top. He almost reached out to grab it so he could toss it to Tommy, but then he paused. Turning his head, Wilbur looked across the sitting room and saw his little brother stretched out across the couch, his golden hair nearly shining against the shimmering silver of the velvet couch cushions. Tommy's boots had been abandoned near the door. Okay, I'm turning the music down. Sorry. It's a bit distracting me. I'm sure it's good levels, but I don't know if that changed anything in OBS, but I don't know. But now that feels too quiet. There we go. That works. Tommy's boots had been abandoned near the door, and Wilbur noticed he was wearing one black sock and one blue sock as he kicked his feet over the edge of the couch's arm. To say the least, he looked comfortable as could be, and clearly didn't want to get up himself to get the Epley to snack on. Which gave Wilbur an idea. Make me, he replied evenly, leaning back in his own chair. Tommy sat up so he could meet Wilbur's eyes over the back of the couch, and frowned. What? Don't be a bitch, just toss me the Epley. Wilbur smirked and ran his fingers over the grooves in the silvery wood of the table he was sitting at. I said to make me give it to you. Realization dawned in Tommy's eyes, and he let out a loud groan as he fell back onto the couch. Come on, Wilbur. I don't want to practice right now. It's hard. Tommy, if you don't practice, it's never going to get easier, Wilbur reminded him. I know. You tell me that every single day, Tommy grumbled, dragging his hands down his face. But I just don't feel like it right now. Wilbur shrugged. Guess you're not getting the apple then? He continued to eye the fruit in the bowl in front of him, watching Tommy from his peripheral vision. His little brother was so stubborn, Wilbur would give him that, but Tommy was also lazy. Even though he was 15 and far too tall to be carried around, he still tried to get Wilbur to give him piggyback rides all around the palace. Admittedly, while Wilbur did end up giving him those rides more often than not, he wasn't going to give in so easily on this. If Tommy wanted the apple, either he was going to have to get up and grab it himself, or he was going to need to practice his voice. He watched the internal debate play out across Tommy's face for a few moments. It was painfully easy to read Tommy's expressions, and Wilbur knew that was something that was going to have to be trained out of him eventually. But for now, at 15, Tommy wore his heart on his sleeve. And because of that, Wilbur knew the second Tommy decided he was going to try and practice his voice. Eyes fluttering shut, Wilbur watched as Tommy repeated the breathing exercises he taught the boy so long ago. His body sunk into the couch cushions as he relaxed, and Wilbur waited with a hopeful smile as Tommy's eyes flickered open again. Give me the apple, Tommy ordered, his voice holding a strange echoing quality that bounced off the walls of the room. Deep inside his chest, Wilbur felt a tug. It was the urge to reach out and grab the apple so he could toss it in Tommy's direction. His hand hovered, halfway stretched out to the fruit bowl, but it was all too easy to ignore the command and pull his hand back to his lap. You're going to have to do better than that, Wilbur teased with a smirk. Tommy scowled. Guess he was going to have to show his little brother how it was done. Closing his eyes, Wilbur took a steadying breath. He let the ocean inside of himself settle, doing the same breathing exercise as Tommy to clear his head. In for 4, out for 8. Rinse and repeat until the waves stop crashing in your head. The waves lapping at the edges of his mind slowed, their rhythmic push and pull growing softer and softer until it disappeared completely. Then, he opened his eyes. Come take the apple, Wilbur ordered. His voice wasn't just his voice as he spoke. It was thousands of voices layered on top of each other. The voices of his ancestors. Voices that reverberated through your skull with commands that forced their way into your very cells. A siren's command filled every part of your body, so it was impossible to do anything but obey it. As soon as Wilbur let his voice slip from his lips, Tommy's eyes glazed over, and he jumped to his feet to rush around the couch. He stumbled towards the table and snatched the apple out of the bowl. Then, once the fruit was in his grasp, his eyes cleared up, and he blinked a few times as he came back to himself. Realizing what Wilbur had done, Tommy frowned and slapped his arm as hard as he could, the sharp sting making Wilbur yelp in pain. You're such a bitch boy, Wilbur, Tommy snapped, taking a vicious bite out of the apple with a loud crunch. You just like to show off that you can do the freaky voice thing way better than I can. The only reason I can use my voice better is because I actually practiced it growing up, Wilbur told him, chuckling at Tommy's childish frustration as he stormed back over to the couch. It wasn't always this easy for me, and it won't get any easier for you unless you practice. But it hurts, Tommy whined, dramatically dropping onto the couch and taking another bite of the Epley. It makes my throat all scratchy when I try to do it. Well, Wilbur knew all about how painful practicing your voice could be. As a child, it wasn't at all uncommon for him to have lost his voice completely from practicing so much the day before. So many nights had been spent whispering commands at Nicky, the two of them huddled under the blankets on his bed as he tried to perfectly mimic her pitch and tone. Nicky's pitch was always steady, never wavering like Wilbur's did. It took far longer for her throat to get scratchy from using her voice, and whenever she used even the simplest command on Wilbur, it was near impossible for him to fight against it. Tommy didn't stay up night after night practicing commands until he couldn't speak at all. He rarely took Wilbur up on his offer to practice mimicking his pitch and tone. In fact, he didn't have that much of a desire to learn how to use his voice at all. No desire to learn, and no desperation to have something for himself. To hold on to one tiny piece of their mother and prove that he had something inside of him that made him valuable. No, Tommy didn't have any of that desperation because he knew how valuable he was. Wilbur supposed that kind of confidence came with being the crown prince, because there wasn't a single person in the palace that didn't treat Tommy like he was made of gold. Wilbur was decidedly not thought of in the same way. Before he could spiral into that train of thought, the door to the sitting room opened, and Wilbur grinned when he spotted a familiar head of pink hair walking through the door. Nicky! Tommy bolted upright from the couch, beaming at Nicky when he spotted her in the doorway. Hi, Nicky! Making her way into the room, the folds of her skirt swishing around her calves with every step, Nicky waved at both brothers as she settled herself at the table across from Wilbur. Hi, guys. What are you both up to? Wilbur's being a bitch, Tommy immediately declared. Nicky giggled while Wilbur rolled his eyes. He's being dramatic. I'm just trying to get him to practice. He paused, glancing at the door to make sure no one was nearby. Well, you know. Her eyes widened in understanding. Ah, I see. Why does that make Wilbur a bitch, Tommy? Because I just wanted my Epley and he wouldn't hand it to me, Tommy groaned, tossing the half-eaten fruit above his head. This is cruel and unusual punishment for a child. He's starving his own little brother for his amusement. You had a giant stack of pancakes for breakfast this morning, Wilbur argued. Yeah, but that was hours ago. I'm a growing boy, Wilbur. Need plenty of calories if I'm gonna be the king. Hold on, why is this song playing? Hold on. This should be playing... Oh. Wait. This should only be playing A Ghost Girl's Isolation, so why is it? Oh, did I not actually... Hold on. I didn't actually click on the album. Whoops, my bad. Let me just fix that real quick. Here we go. Need plenty of calories if I'm gonna be the king. Wilbur rolled his eyes again at his brother's antics. You're ridiculous. No, you're ridiculous, and you're ugly. Excuse you, that was a low blow, Wilbur gasped, although he wasn't actually offended by the jab. Tommy rested his chin on top of the couch cushion, looking back at him with a shit-eating grin. Just saying the truth, man. Sorry if you're too obsessed with your dumb face to hear it. Letting out a short laugh, Wilbur stayed still for a moment, staring down Tommy and letting him back in a sense of false safety. Then, after a beat, he dove for the couch and Tommy screeched. Wait, I'm sorry! Tommy was cut off when Wilbur grabbed him by a loose grabbed him in a loose headlock, holding Tommy against his chest as tight as he could without hurting him. Excuse me. Let go of me! He yelled, kicking his legs out and trying to pry Wilbur's arms off of him. Not until you take that back, Wilbur said, laughing at Tommy's pathetic attempts to break his grip. Never! Fuck you! Tommy shouted, and Wilbur hissed when Tommy blindly smacked him in the face. In retaliation, Wilbur smacked the top of his head, and Tommy gasped in a way that was definitely over-exaggerated for how hard he hit him. That hurt! Tommy screeched, slapping Wilbur's arm hard enough that Wilbur could feel the red mark it left behind. You're such a bitch, you piece of shit, ugly asswipe, I'm gonna kill you! Tommy? A new voice in the room startled both Wilbur and Tommy out of their fight, the two of them freezing as they looked up at the same time. Standing in the doorway was a shorter boy with a mess of brown and blonde hair, the colors popping up in uneven chunks that he insisted was natural despite how strange it was. Oh, is this Tubbo? Bexy, thank you for the raid! Oh man, how was your stream? Oh yay, and the layover works. I don't know if you heard it, but thank you for the raid. How was your stream? What did you do? That's the noise. It's just really delayed for some reason. I am reading fanfiction. It was very popular, just finished Arc 1 of Lore on Aeternum SMP? Well, that's cool. I've never heard of that. I'm reading The Stars and Their Children by Bones and the Bees. This is chapter 1, so haven't really gotten that far. So far what I'm gathering is that Wilbur and Tommy are brothers, and Nikki is related somehow, I think? And they all have this power called the Voice. It's basically like, if you ever read Tommy and Its Clinic for Supervillains, written by the same author as this, it's kind of like Siren's power. It's a very cool SMP. I have a lot of fun on there. That's cool. This is going to be my last stream on a laptop for a while, because I'm getting a PC tomorrow. I'm really excited for it, because that means I'll be able to stream more things without worrying about lag. That's why I haven't streamed for about a week. It was because I tried streaming Minecraft, but everything was just too laggy for me to handle. Yeah, it is. Well, anyway, welcome new viewers. If you want to follow, be sure to, and if you enjoy my content, follower goal is doing an entire stream in a British accent. Whichever that one may be. It's gonna be whichever one is right after, like, when I hit the follower goal. Let's see. By the way, heads up, I do use accents for the characters. It helps with my immersion. Sorry if that kind of... Sorry if my accents are cringe. Let's see. Standing in the doorway was a shorter boy with a mess of brown and blonde hair, the colors popping up in uneven chunks that he insisted was natural despite how strange it was. As soon as Tommy spotted the boy, he gasped in delight, shoving Wilbur away and scrambling to his feet. "Tubbo!" Tommy cried out, practically jumping on his best friend and wrapping his arms around him. "Where have you been? I've been so bored today. Unlike you, Mr. Crown Prince, I actually have a job I need to do," Tubbo snorted, shoving Tommy back. "Ooh, I'm Tubbo, and I'm so busy and boring all the time," Tommy teased, doing a poor imitation of Tubbo's voice. "What are you doing here, then, if you're so busy with work?" "Because you are my work right now," Tubbo said, grabbing Tommy's wrist and tugging him towards the door. "You're 20 minutes late for your lessons." "Oh. Hold on, who's... Someone's car is going off outside and I'm a bit concerned." "Oh. Wilbur probably should have checked the clock. But I don't want to do stupid maths problems are foolish," Tommy complained, dropping his head on Tubbo's shoulder. "I don't even know why I need to learn maths in the first place. Kings don't do maths. A king should be well versed in a variety of subjects," Wilbur reminded him, "like languages, literature, history. And maths too, I know," Tommy said, cutting him off with a loud groan. "You know, I'd practice my voice if I could use it on Foolish so I could make him do my problems for me." Wilbur and Nicky both tensed at that. "Tommy, you know you can't." "Yeah, I know," Tommy huffed. "I can't let anyone know I'm learning how to use my voice. Believe me, I'm well aware of that. I was just saying it'd give me a lot more motivation to practice." "Well, you can't, or else the Themis ambassadors will get really pissed at you," Tubbo said, pulling Tommy to the door. "Now come on, we gotta get going. I got other shit to do that's more important than dragging you to your tutor." "But as my personal servant, shouldn't you make me your #1 priority? I will punch you." "That's called assault in a royal, big man. That's not gonna be— Ouch!" Wilbur snorted as the boys' voices faded down the hall, knowing the incredulous look Tommy probably gave Tubbo when he hit him. Turning his focus back to Nicky, he saw she was still staring at the door, her lips pressed into a thin line. "He's not really taking this stuff seriously, is he?" Nicky asked softly, a crease forming between her brows. "He's only 15, Wilbur reasoned, ignoring the dread pooling in his gut. Nicky glanced back to him, her silver eyes glimmering with something far too knowing. "You weren't like that when you were his age." And that was the truth of it, wasn't it? When Wilbur was 15, he had already dedicated himself to his studies and his practice of his voice. He threw himself into learning everything he could about Eldingvegar's history, its economy, its culture, everything he needed to know to be Tommy's advisor. "I'm glad he's not like me," Wilbur said after a moment. "I never got to complain about my classes or goof around with my friends, or just be a normal 15-year-old. You know that." Something sad flashed through Nicky's eyes. "Yeah, I know, Will. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad Tommy gets to have more of a real childhood." She paused, pointed nails tapping against the wood table. "I just worry about what kind of a leader he'll be." Wilbur stiffened, because he also had the same worries, but didn't like to put a voice to them. "He'll be fine. I know he will." Wilbur reassured her, even though he wasn't convinced of that himself. Nikki sighed and stretched out a hand between them, the silvery pink scales on her palm glinting under the lights above their heads. Silently, Wilbur placed his hand in hers as she squeezed it gently, the thin webbing between her fingers soft against his non-webbed ones. "You know what I'm going to say," Nikki told him, staring at their hands. Wilbur kept his eyes on the table. "There's no point in going over it again." "I know there's no point, it just—" She paused, squeezing his hand harder this time. "It just frustrates me, because I think even Tommy would agree that you would be a much better fit." "Nikki." Wilbur cut her off, pulling his hand out of hers. "I said there's no point in going over it again. I'm never going to be king. I have no birthright to take the throne. I was always going to be an advisor, and I've accepted that." "But don't you want more?" Nikki asked, frowning at him. "Yes." Wilbur had to bite his tongue to keep the answer from spilling out of his mouth. Because, yes, he wanted more. Of course he wanted more. He wanted to be more than the bastard prince. He wanted to be more than a mistake his mother made before she married Tommy's father. But that wasn't the role he had been cast for in his life. "Doesn't matter," Wilbur said instead. "When Tommy turns 18, he'll be crowned king, and I will be his advisor. He'll be a good king. I'll make sure of it." Although Nikki didn't seem pleased at this, she seemed to understand that he wanted to change the subject and decided not to push it. "Themis has been getting angsty lately," Nikki said after a few moments, pulling her hands back to her side of the table. Now that caught Wilbur's attention. "How so?" "I'm not sure. They've been asking for reports more often, and the ambassadors have been pulling me aside for more meetings on how the two of you are doing," Nikki admitted, dropping her voice despite the fact that they were the only two in the room. "I feel like there's something more going on that they're not telling me." "Like what?" Wilbur pushed, frowning at her. "Like they're concerned about our alliance?" "Possibly, but I don't know why they would be worried about that changing." "Our alliance has been secured ever since Tommy was born," Nikki said, fiddling with the cuffs of her blouse. "Have you noticed anything unusual with the King Regent?" Leaning back in his chair, Wilbur thought over his past few interactions with Eret. They haven't seemed to be acting unusual. Maybe more stressed, but that's to be expected in the windy season. Humming, Nikki nodded. "I'm probably just being paranoid." Wilbur's frown deepened. "Don't brush your instincts off like that. If Themis is acting strange, you need to keep an eye on them." Hold on a second. "But it's not like there's anything we can do, even if something odd is going on. The ambassadors only tell me limited information because they know I'm biased towards you and Tommy," Nikki said, huffing a bit, "though I don't know what else they expected. I've been here so long that I barely remember Themis. Or Themis or whatever. Sure, I'm an emissary for the planet and title, but Elding Vega is my home, is more of my home than Themis ever has been." "At least you've been there," Wilbur muttered. "I don't think they'd let me and Tommy on the planet even if we wanted to travel there." Nikki snorted. "Definitely not before Tommy is crowned. They might invite the two of you to the planet after his coronation to reaffirm their alliances, but I'm not sure about that. Talking about his mother's home planet was always a strange experience because of how disconnected Wilbur felt from the place. Despite the fact that he lived there for the first few years of his life, he had been far too young to remember any of it. He might have been able to use the siren's voice, but there was little else about him that would qualify him as a siren. But then again, if you were to ask anyone in the palace if he was Elding Vegrian, the answer would most likely be a resounding no. He was just Wilbur, a prince in title alone and nothing more. Keep an eye on the ambassadors and let me know if they do anything else unusual, Wilbur said after a few moments, staring at his hands. I'll watch Eret, see if I notice anything off with them. I will. Nikki nodded, giving him a reassuring smile. Suddenly, a soft dinging sound cut their conversation short. Pulling out a small circular disc from his pocket, Wilbur set it on the table before tapping the top of it. Prince Orpheus, the King Regent requests your presence in the observatory, an attendant's voice said, echoing out from the small disc that was glowing a soft shade of blue. Taking a breath, Wilbur nodded. I'll be right there. Excuse me. The disc went dark again, and Wilbur put it back in his pocket. Then, he pushed to his feet, ignoring Nikki's concerned look. Do you want me to come with? She asked, also rising to stand. They probably want to speak to me in private, so I don't think you can tag along, Wilbur said, although he so badly wished he could bring Nikki with him. It wasn't that speaking with Eret was unpleasant. Wilbur had known them since he was a child, after all. But having Nikki by his side always made him feel more steady on his feet. Her presence kept his shoulders straight and head held high, because he knew she would tell him off if he were to shrink in on himself. I'll go train then. Come find me afterwards, Nikki said, reaching out to squeeze his arm. Wilbur gave her a grateful smile. I'll give you the full report on what they say. It was said as a joke, but they both knew Wilbur would tell her everything no matter what. With that, she dropped her hand, smoothed out the wrinkles in her pale blue skirt, and left the room. Now alone, Wilbur smoothed out his jacket, absently thumbing at the silver embroidery settled over his heart, before shaking himself off. He had a meeting to attend. The clicking of his boots against marble echoed off the cavernous walls of the palace with every step. A few servants passed him, all dipping their heads in customary respect, but offering no greetings for him. Only when he was with Tommy did servants greet him as they passed by, and only because they had to greet Tommy first, so then it would seem odd for them to greet Prince Theseus and not Prince Orpheus. It stopped stinging long ago. Soon, Wilbur found himself stepping into the observatory. Enormous windows stretched from floor to ceiling, letting light bathe the room in varying shades of pink. In the center of the room stood the orrery, a model of the solar system Elding Vega was located in. Gold and silver rods stretched out with models of the different planets settled on top, rotating slowly around a flickering orange replica of their sun. The metal glimmered in the dim light coming through the windows, and in front of the orrery, Wilbur spotted Eret. Wilbur, they greeted, turning at the sound of his footsteps. Thank you for coming so quickly. Wilbur bowed his head at Eret, before stepping up to join them in front of the orrery. I was told to come as soon as I could. Oh, I wish the attendant had specified it was nothing urgent. I hope I wasn't interrupting something, Eret said, folding their hands in front of the billowing peach chiffon of their dress. You weren't, Wilbur replied quickly, keeping his eyes on the multicolored model of Elding Veger as it slowly moved in front of his gaze. Eret hummed. That's good. Past the solar system model, Wilbur could see the barest pinpricks of stars twinkling against the purple-pink sky outside the windows. On the horizon, Wilbur could see the sky shifting from pink to something more akin to the same shade of peach as Eret's dress, and knew that if he was facing the other way, he would see the horizon shifting to a darker shade of indigo. So, I'm simply calling you in to ask for an update on how Tommy is progressing with his studies? Eret asked after a few moments, shifting to face Wilbur fully. Wilbur frowned, looking at Eret and meeting their pure white eyes. Wouldn't it make more sense for you to ask his tutors that? Especially considering his primary tutor is an old friend of yours. I've spoken to his tutors, but I also wanted to get your perspective on how he's progressing. Oh. Wilbur blinked, still confused as to why Eret would want his opinion on this, but figured it wasn't worth questioning. He's progressing fine, I think. He's still so young, so he's not always the most diligent, but I'm sure that'll improve as the years go on. Eret nodded, and for the briefest of seconds, Wilbur thought he saw a frown flash across their face. But it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, their features smoothed back out with that eternal youth of theirs Wilbur still struggled to understand. If a stranger were to try and guess how old Eret was, they would probably say they were somewhere in their early adulthood, mid-20s by human standards. But Wilbur had known Eret since he was a very young child, and they had always looked that way. Although Eret's true age was unknown, most of the rumors estimated them to be somewhere in the ballpark of 150 years old. I'm glad you think so. I know some of his tutors have worried about his tendency for insolence, Eret said, chuckling lightly. Foolish isn't worried, though. In fact, I think he gets Tommy off topic during their lessons more than Tommy himself does. I'm sure Foolish has taught him literally any other subject besides maths. I'm sure Foolish taught him literally any other subject besides maths, then Tommy would never be late to his lessons. Wilbur huffed, a small smile crossing his face. Eret nodded. Certainly think that would be the case. They paused for a moment, turning away from Wilbur and back to the orrery. How are you holding up personally, Wilbur? Me? Eret nodded again, and Wilbur furrowed his brows. I'm alright. My lessons are rather minimal these days, but I like to believe I'm progressing well with learning about our trade agreements and alliances. What have you been learning about most recently? Eret asked. I've been told to brush up on the current imperial powers that pose potential threats to us. I've been familiarizing myself with both the Antarctic Empire and the Asempi Empire, although it's far more difficult to find information on the Antarctic Empire than you would expect. I would imagine that's because the Antarctic Empire is so young. Wilbur nodded. Yeah, that's what I've been gathering. The Asempi Empire is still relatively young as well, but the Antarctic is far more closed off than the Asempi is. Asempi is young, but very powerful. Aerith said, a strange tightness to their voice that Wilbur couldn't understand the meaning of. What do you know of it so far? I know that it's currently being ruled by Emperor Dream XD III, and that he only took up the throne a few years ago when his father passed. I know that he's already taken far more planets than his father or grandfather did this early into their reigns, and I also know that he's said to be known to play dirty to get what he wants. Aerith's brows pinched. Yes, that's what I've heard about him as well. Glancing at the King Regent, Wilbur noted the tension lining their shoulders. Dream hasn't made any threats toward us, has he? Immediately, Aerith shook their head. No, of course not. Dream's no fool, and he knows better than to get on Elding Vega's bad side. Even a man as powerful as Dream has to rely on us. Even a man as powerful as Dream has to rely on us for Blazophane. Wilbur muttered, snorting a bit. Blazophane was the only reason his father was able to live for as long as he did. And I'm sure Dream intends to outlive him by many more years. Aerith agreed, muscles twitching in their jaw. Don't worry yourself too much about Dream, or about SMP in general right now. You still have a few years before you need to be perfectly up to date on all of that. You called me in here because you were worried about Tommy studying. When he still has several years, you and Tommy have very different roles in store for you. You know this. Aerith said, cutting him off. Besides, you've always been diligent in your studies, even when you were Tommy's age. You deserve to relax sometimes, especially since you're so young. Wilbur huffed. I'm an adult. You're 19. That's hardly an adult. Aerith teased, flashing him a warm smile. It certainly didn't feel like Wilbur was anything less than an adult. Like he'd said to Nikki, he never felt like he'd actually gotten to have a real childhood. Wilbur was never a child of Elding Vega like Tommy was. He was the bastard prince, the boy who technically had no right to stay on the planet after his mother had died. But he was still the brother of the future king, which meant enough to let him stay in the palace and retain his title as prince. But he was hyper-aware at all times of how unwelcome he was. He didn't have the leeway to cause problems, to be insolent. This planet was the only home he'd ever known, and yet he was always going to be a guest on it. Still, he wasn't going to complain about any of that to Aerith. They were one of the few people who didn't treat Wilbur like an unwelcome guest in the palace, so at least there was that. I suppose. Wilbur acquiesced after a few moments. Humming, Aerith pushed their dark curly hair out of their eyes, before their smile faded. Have you been holding up all right? Hi! How you doing? I'm doing well. I watched MCC earlier, and then I hung out a bit. It was my siblings' graduation party. And now I'm reading this. It's called The Stars and Their Children by Bones and the Bees. I'm kind of using Bones and the Bees as like a failsafe when it comes to reading fanfic, because I know that they're not going to have anything. I was watching Rambu's stream, so yeah. That's still nuts to me. Like, I'm really happy for Rambu. Excuse me. "28 seconds, I know. Let's see. missed it, but I saw the VOD. Yeah. Humming. This fic is about. So I think it's like another SBI kind of one, except there's no techno. As far as I know. The way that the way that she described it was inspired by Dune, although it's not an AU. I've never seen Dune, so all I know is that Wilbur, Nikki, and Tommy have this thing called the Voice. It's kind of like Siren's ability in Tommy in his clinic. Tommy and Wilbur are princes on this planet, but even though Tommy's younger, he's the one that's going to be crowned king because he is directly blood related to the king, and Wilbur is not because he was his mom had him before marrying the king. Kinda, yeah. Let's see. Humming, Eret pushed their dark curly hair out of their eyes before their smile faded. "Have you been holding up all right?" they asked in a much softer voice this time. "I know the windy season can be difficult for you." Tensing, Wilbur's eyes flickered to the windows once more. A tree near the window trembled in the powerful wind gusts that were blowing past the palace, and if he pressed his ear to the glass, he knew he would be able to hear the near-deafening howl of the wind as well. A ship taking off into the sky. A loud screech as the wing of the shuttle is ripped off entirely. Panic filling every fiber of his being as he watches the shuttle careen to the side, disappearing into the horizon. His own screams being drowned out by the screaming wind. Shaking himself out of the memory, Wilbur shoved down the buzzing in his chest and forced his attention back to Eret. "It's been fine. Just trying not to focus on it," Wilbur explained, coughing to clear his throat. Eret made a sympathetic noise and reached out to pat his shoulder. "Let me know if you need anything, Wilbur. As your parents' advisor, obviously it has been my duty to ensure the planet continued to thrive after their accident. But I also like to think my duty has always included ensuring both you and Tommy are safe and whole as well." Wilbur flashed them a grateful smile. "I know, Eret. You've been wonderful to us." Although he wasn't sure why, Wilbur could have sworn something horribly sad flashed over Eret's face at this. In the summary of this, it says that Tommy and Wilbur get betrayed. I have a feeling I know by whom. During dinner that evening, Eret's sadness didn't seem to let up. Because of the windy season, there were no ships coming to and from Eldingvegr, meaning there were no dinners planned to host diplomats and ambassadors. Instead, dinner was a quiet affair, with only a few people present. It was Wilbur, Tommy, Eret, Nikki, and Foolish. Oh, by the way, Foolish is one of Tommy's tutors. The first time Eret had invited their old friend to join in on their private dinners, Wilbur had been confused. But even though Wilbur had never been tutored by Foolish like Tommy was, he got along with the man quite well. He was similar to Eret in that he didn't seem to think any less of Wilbur, but that might also have been due to the fact that Foolish wasn't from Eldingvegr either. Foolish didn't speak much of where he came from. Wilbur only knew that he and Eret had met a very long time ago, and that Foolish had been traveling between planets for a while before Eret invited him to Eldingvegr. Right now, Foolish and Eret were speaking in low voices over their food at the head of the table. Nikki was sitting on one side of Wilbur, while Tommy sat on the other. Did you ever have to learn how to do something called a logarithmic function, Wilbur? Tommy asked, frowning at him with a fork halfway to his mouth. Wilbur frowned. I believe so, but it was a while ago, so I couldn't tell you what they actually do. Tommy groaned, taking an exaggerated bite of his food. I was gonna ask you if you could help me with my homework, but I guess you're useless. Tommy, helping you on your homework usually means you trying to get me to do the problems for you, Wilbur huffed, elbowing his brother. Excuse me, that's called cheating, which is something I would never do. Tommy shot back, scowling at him. Oh yeah, definitely not, Wilbur teased. You've definitely never begged me to write an essay for you before. Of course, this was when Foolish decided to chime into the conversation. Huh? Cheating? Face going bright red, Tommy let out a nervous laugh and quickly shook his head. What? I wasn't talking about cheating. That was Wilbur. He's such a wrong'un trying to convince me to cheat on my homework. You're such a little liar, Wilbur exclaimed, punching Tommy in the arm. Ow! I'm not a liar. You're a bad influence. I'm telling you not to cheat, you brat. And I was just asking for help. Boys, Eric cut in, pinching the bridge of their nose. No bickering at the dinner table. We've talked about this before. Huffing, Tommy slumped back in his seat. Fine. From his angle, Wilbur could see Tommy holding the hand up under the table, and when he glanced down, he realized Tommy was flipping him off. He shot Tommy a dirty look, and when Eric turned back to their food, he punched Tommy in the arm again. Tommy yelped while Wilbur smoothed out his face to the picture of innocence, ignoring the suspicious look Eric shot his way while trying not to snicker. On his left, Nicky just seemed exasperated, which he also expertly ignored. So, Eric suddenly said, startling Wilbur and Tommy both to attention. The wind is going to die down tonight, it seems, though it'll only be a few hours before it picks up again. Are we going to try and get any ships off the planet during the window? Wilbur asked, straightening up in his seat. Eric nodded. We'll see if we can send off a shipment of blazophane that we collected before the season began, but weren't able to process in time. If the window isn't long enough, though, it's not a problem. The shipment can stay here till the season ends. Why are we taking the risk, though? Tommy jumped in, surprising Wilbur. Mirroring Wilbur's surprise, Eric blinked a few times. What do you mean? I mean, if the blazophane can stay till the season ends, why even bothering trying to ship it off during the window? We know the predictions aren't always accurate, and if the ship takes off and it's still in the atmosphere when the wind picks up again... I wouldn't worry about that, Eric reassured him. If it seems like the winds might pick up again before the ship can get out of the atmosphere, then we won't launch it. And again, it's not necessary, but we were supposed to send out a shipment to Themis before the windy season picked up, so it's already late. Themis has plenty of blazophane from us, though. I don't think it's worth risking an entire fucking ship instead of just making them wait a few more weeks. Tommy scoffed, frowning now. Themis is our most closely allied planet, Wilbur pointed out, Nikki's words from earlier about the ambassador's strange behavior echoing in his mind. If the risk is low enough, it's better to try and get the shipment to them as quickly as possible. Especially considering how Queen Marina's doing, Foolish added. She's been sick for a while, so they're pretty antsy about getting their hands on more blazophane. Nicky and Wilbur both frowned at this. Lord Foolish, What do you mean that Queen Marina is sick? Nikki asked, tightening her grip on her fork. Foolish's eyes widened, and he glanced at Aerith, who was sighing into their hand. Oh, I thought you guys would have known about that, Foolish said, chuckling awkwardly. Can we pretend I didn't say that? Why wasn't I informed of this? Nikki pushed, ignoring Foolish's request. I'm an emissary of Themis. Why wouldn't I be told if the queen was ill? Lady Niachu, you know we have no control over what the ambassadors do and don't tell you, Aerith reminded her, a quiet warning underlying their words. We have to take that up with them, not us. Then why wasn't I informed of this? Wilbur jumped in, frowning at Aerith. I'm supposed to be kept up to date on exactly this kind of stuff. Again, the ambassadors control most of the information we receive from Themis. I assumed if they wanted you to be aware of it, they would have told you. Aerith explained. If you want any more information on it, you'll have to go to them. As you all are aware, Themis likes to keep their political affairs private. But why keep it from us? Tommy asked, still frowning. Our mum was literally part of the Themis royal family. Queen Marina is related to us, right? She's your aunt, Nikki murmured. Tommy nodded at that. Exactly! Don't we have a right to know if our aunt is sick? It's more complicated than that, unfortunately, Aerith said, folding their hands in front of them. Yes, you are related to Queen Marina by blood, but the Sirens don't consider either of you to be proper Sirens. Neither of you were raised on Themis, or of you are both only half Siren rather than full Siren. Not to mention, you're both male, and the Themesian line of succession defaults to the women first. Okay, so Nikki is not related to them. She's just part. Oh, it's species. The Sirens are species, or Themesians. Themesians are species. Okay. Wilbur knew that. Of course he knew the Sirens didn't give a shit about him and Tommy, but he was surprised that Tommy hadn't seemed to realize that until now. Excuse me. Swallowing down a lump in his throat, Tommy's eyes fell to his plate. Oh, I see. You'll understand it a bit more when you're older, Foolish reassured him, trying to give Tommy a kind smile. It's not like a personal thing against you. The Sirens are kind of just like that. Pausing, Foolish glanced at Nikki. No offense, Lady Niachu. None taken, Lord Foolish, Nikki muttered, twisting her fingers into the napkin in her lap. An awkward silence fell over the table after that. Foolish went back to eating, pointedly not looking at anything but his food. Wilbur could tell that Nikki was angry, with the way she was eating her dinner just a bit too quickly, and how her eyes were glowing a bit brighter than they usually did, but she was doing her best to hide it. Tommy had gone oddly quiet, with his brows furrowed as he picked at his food without the same interest he had in it before. Aerith, meanwhile, had that sad look on their face again. Wilbur caught their eyes several times and realized that they were staring at both him and Tommy. It made him squirm in his seat to feel their empty wide eyes on him, and he wondered what could be going through their head. It wasn't long before Tommy excused himself from the table, and Wilbur found he wasn't very hungry anymore either, so he did the same. Nikki, unsurprisingly, followed suit, so the three found themselves walking away from the dining hall and to their rooms. I just don't get it, Tommy muttered as they turned down the hall to the residential wing of the palace. I thought the Sirens were allied with us because of me. They are, Nikki told him. You're part of the royal bloodline for both Themis and Eldingvega, so you're at the crux of the alliance they have. But just because you have siren blood doesn't mean they actually consider you a siren. Tommy sighed. Guess that makes sense. Still feels weird. They stopped walking when they reached the door to Tommy's room, and subsequently Wilbur's, since their rooms were right next to each other. Oh, whoops. I accidentally clicked off of my stream. There we go. I couldn't see chat for a few moments. You two gonna go talk about secret shit in Will's room? Tommy asked, frowning at the two of them. Wilbur snorted. Tommy knew their routine far too well. You're welcome to join us, Nikki offered sweetly, though you'll probably be bored by our conversation. Huffing, Tommy shook his head. No thanks. I had enough political talk at dinner. As he turned the doorknob to his room, Wilbur held out a hand. Yeah. Come say goodnight to me before you go to sleep, Gremlin, Wilbur reminded him, ruffling his brother's hair. Tommy smacked his hand away with a pout. I'm not a baby. I don't need you to tuck me in. Who said it was about you? Maybe I just want to talk to my precious, adorable, tiny I will slit your throat in your sleep. Tommy deadpanned. Wilbur chuckled. I'd like to see you try. That'll be my way of saying goodnight. I'm gonna go in there and kill your ass. Before Tommy could finish, Nikki opened the door to Wilbur's room and dragged him inside, with Tommy glaring at him before the door shut once again. Wilbur knew that despite his protests, Tommy would come say goodnight to him no matter what. Not only because it was their routine, but also because it was the windy season. Even if Tommy didn't say it out loud, Wilbur knew it bothered him more than he let on, just like it bothered Wilbur. Drink break. Oh yeah. Right now, though, Wilbur wasn't focusing on the wind howling outside his windows. Instead, he followed Nikki to the center of the room, where his bed had been perfectly made up by the servants after the mess he'd left at it this morning. Dropping his wrist, Nikki tucked her shirt under her as she climbed up onto the bed, and Wilbur settled himself next to her. Immediately, the smile she'd had on for Tommy fell from her face. There's something weird going on, Nikki said without preamble. Wilbur nodded, his own grin fading as he thought back to that disaster of a dinner. Yeah, no shit. I get why maybe me and Tommy wouldn't be told about Queen Marina being sick, but for you not to be told is just, it's not normal. Nikki agreed, biting her lip. I guess this makes sense as to why the ambassadors were asking me for more information. If something happens to Queen Marina, they'll want to ensure our alliance with Eldingvega stays secured through the transfer of power. Who's next in line for the throne? Wilbur asked, wringing his hands in his lap. Nikki furrowed her brows. I believe Queen Marina's firstborn daughter is, well, her name is Marina too, but her second name is Hannah. She should be the one getting ready to inherit the throne. Do you know much about Hannah? No, I don't. I'm sure she's been preparing her entire life to take the throne, though, and I'm pretty sure she's either around our age or a few years older. She paused, narrowing her eyes. I don't see why Hannah would want to dissolve our alliance, so it still doesn't make sense to me why the ambassadors are acting so strangely about this whole thing. Humming, Wilbur dragged his hands through his hair as he let out a quiet sigh. I can't help but feel like there's something missing here. Eric's definitely acting off about something, but can't tell if it's just the stress of the windy season or something more. Excuse me. What did you two talk about during your meeting? Nikki asked, raising an eyebrow at him. They just wanted my opinion on how Tommy was progressing with his studies, and they also asked how my own studies were going. Wilbur told her, fiddling with the ends of his jacket. On the surface there was nothing unusual about our conversation, but they just seemed sad about something. Sad? I guess. Something was bothering them, I could tell that much. Humming, Nikki absently poked at the thin webbing between her fingers. It might just be that time of year? The windy season brings up bad memories for them just as it does for you and Tommy. Wilbur stared at her for a moment, noting how she was keeping her eyes on her lap. Do you actually believe that? Hands going still, Nikki let out a soft sigh and shook her head. No. The timing of that with Queen Marina is just... it's too strange to ignore. There was a beat of silence, the webbing points of her ear twitching like they always did when she was thinking deeply about something. I fucking hate this, you know. Hate what? Wilbur questioned. Being left out of these discussions. Having all these politics go over our heads like no one trusts us. I've spent my entire life being told I'm here on behalf of Themis, but Themis clearly doesn't trust me like they trust the ambassadors, so it makes me wonder what I'm even supposed to do here. Wilbur couldn't stop himself from scoffing at that. Yeah, trust me. I know what that feels like. I wasn't trying to say you didn't, Nikki clarified, glancing up to meet his eyes. That's the reason I'm telling you this. You're the only one who gets it. All of Wilbur's frustration faded as quickly as it appeared. Shoulders slumping, he leaned against Nikki's side, and she looped her arm through his. Outside the window, Wilbur could still hear the rushing of the wind, although it was quieter than it usually was. Do you remember when we were kids, and during the windy season you could never sleep, so we'd sit on your bed and try to sing loud enough to drown out the wind? Nikki asked after a minute of silence. The memory made Wilbur smile. And then if we sang too loudly, we'd wake up the staff, but because it was siren singing, we'd just accidentally enchant them so they'd all be standing outside my room like they were sleepwalking. Nikki snorted. Yep. The ambassadors were convinced I had a gift for singing because of that, not realizing half of that was your power too. I remember that. Wilbur laughed, and then they kept asking you to sing at events, and you'd have to make up excuses for why you couldn't. I told them I had stage fright, Nikki explained, grinning now. One time I even made myself cry when they were trying to get me to perform a banquet. They never realized your gift was actually in acting rather than singing. Wilbur huffed. At this, Nikki's smile faded. They still have no idea how much I've lied to them. They know my loyalties lie with you and Tommy more than they lie with Themis, but I don't think they realize the extent. It's our own fault, Wilbur muttered, focusing on the warmth from Nikki's side. If they wanted you to be loyal to Themis, they should have given you more of a reason other than it's your duty. A beat passed, and Wilbur straightened up to look at Nikki directly. Whatever's going on now with Themis and Eldingvega, I want you to remember that you're with us, okay? Me and Tommy. Nicky nodded, giving him a grateful smile. I know Will. Another moment of silence hung between them. And then, Nicky pulled herself away from Wilbur's side and pushed to her feet. I should go back to my room now, she said, straightening out her skirt. I'll try to learn more about Queen Marina from the ambassadors tomorrow. Maybe you should try and do the same, so we can see if they give us different information. That's a good idea, Wilbur agreed. Outside the window, there was the sound of a loud thud, and Nicky glanced out to the pink and purple sky with a soft frown. Do you want me to make you sleep before I leave? Nicky offered, glancing back at him with worried eyes. It was a tempting offer. Nicky knew Wilbur always had trouble sleeping during the windy season, and this wouldn't have been the first time she used her voice on him to make him sleep, because there wouldn't be any way for him to sleep otherwise. But still, Wilbur forced himself to shake his head. No, I still need to say goodnight to Tommy. Nodding in understanding, Nicky flashed him another smile. All right then, but let me know if you change your mind. Then, with one final wave, she left the room with the door clicking shut softly behind her. Now alone, Wilbur let out the shaky breath he'd been holding ever since he spoke to Aerith earlier that day. Things were so confusing right now. There was his worry about Tommy's future role as king. There were the strange things going on between Themis and Eldingbecker. There was Aerith's particular sadness. And on top of it all, the windy season was making him incredibly anxious. There was an uncomfortable itch under his skin that he couldn't scratch. A twist in his gut that told him something was wrong. Something bigger was going on, and it wasn't going to be very long before Wilbur found out what it was. At least he had Nicky by his side to help him figure this out. Nicky's gonna die, isn't she? Sorry. I read that sentence and I was like, something's gonna happen to Nicky. She's dead. Tommy was still too young to fully grasp the strange machinations that came with the royal courts and interplanetary politics. If Wilbur told him his worries, the kid would just think he was being paranoid for no reason. Maybe Wilbur was being paranoid, but his gut told him he had plenty of reason to be. Several minutes after Nicky left, Wilbur forced himself to his feet to change into his pajamas. Leaving his delicately embroidered coat laying haphazardly over a chair, he tossed his boots to the side and ran his fingers through his hair to get rid of the last vestiges of gel the servants had put in to tame his curls. Once changed, he sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing the lenses of his glasses with the edge of his shirt to try and get out the smudges. As he was doing it, though, he was interrupted by a soft knocking on his door. Except it wasn't from the door Nicky had left through. It was from the door that connected his and Tommy's rooms to each other. Excuse me. Well? Tommy called out from the other side. You still awake? Yeah, I'm here. You can come in, Wilbur replied. The door was gently pushed open, revealing Tommy standing in the doorway, already dressed in his pajamas. His own golden curls were sticking up in every direction, and even without his glasses on, Wilbur could see sleep tugging at the corners of his eyes. Are you going to bed? Wilbur asked, setting his glasses back on the bridge of his nose. Furrowing his brows, Tommy wrapped his arms around himself and shook his head. I was trying to sleep. I actually wanted to ask if... He hesitated, biting the inside of his cheek. Can I sleep in your room tonight? Tommy's voice was so small compared to his loud teasing from earlier in the day. This was the version of Tommy that very few people saw. The version that was mostly reserved for Wilbur alone, and sometimes Nikki, depending on the situation. Not the chaotic and loud-mouthed crown prince, but the boy who never wanted to admit his fear of the wind. The boy who was soft-spoken when asking for real favors from his brother. The sensitive kid who Wilbur had practically raised. Yeah, of course, bud. You know you can always come in here if you want, Wilbur said softly, pushing to his feet and padding over to the doorway. It might be easier for us to sleep in your room, though, just because your bed is a bit bigger than mine is. Okay, then. Tommy nodded. Resting a hand on Tommy's shoulder, Wilbur turned off the lights in his own room as they passed through the tiny passageway that connected their rooms. In Tommy's room, Wilbur could see the trees in the window had stopped shaking in the wind, which made sense since Eric said the wind was going to die down for a bit tonight. The routine between them was well established at this point. Wilbur stretched himself across Tommy's bed first, and then held his arms out for his little brother. Tommy dove under the blankets, squirming until his head was resting on Wilbur's chest, and Wilbur readjusted so his chin was on top of Tommy's head. As the two were getting comfortable, there was a knock at the normal entrance to Tommy's room, and they both paused. "Who is it?" Tommy called out. "It's me, dipshit," Tubbo yelled back. "Can I come in? You gotta call me your highness first." "Oh, fuck you, man," Tubbo said, ignoring Tommy's request as he opened the door. The servant boy paused when he spotted Wilbur, but only blinked once before shaking himself off. Different servants had found the two brothers sleeping in the same bed plenty of times before, so it wasn't anything surprising. If anything, it was almost odd that Tubbo did a double take at it, but Wilbur figured he was just surprised. "What have you got for me, Tubstus?" Tommy asked, not bothering to lift his head off of Wilbur's chest. Tubbo held up a tray that had a pristine glass of water settled on it, along with a small dish, sleeping pills. Wait, pills. Tubbo has this kind of thing where, L's, are kind of W's, so... Sleeping pills. Eric told me to give them both to you and Wilbur tonight. Wilbur furrowed his brows. Why? I don't know. They said they had a feeling you two might have trouble sleeping tonight. Tubbo shrugged, setting the tray down on Tommy's nightstand. It was then that Wilbur saw there were two dishes on the tray, each one with a singular white pill in the center of it. I don't like this. Something is gonna happen! Huh. Wilbur supposed that made sense considering the wind was supposed to die down tonight. Eric knew the two of them better than Wilbur gave them credit for, which meant they also knew it was almost more upsetting for both of them when the wind died down for a few hours compared to when it was howling constantly for days on end. "Thanks," Tommy said, rolling over to press his face into Wilbur's shirt. Tubbo frowned. "Aren't you going to take them?" Tommy didn't look back at Tubbo. "I don't know. Maybe. Will and I are talking though, so I'm not going to take them right this second." For some reason, Tubbo's frown deepened. "I mean, it takes a few minutes for them to kick in, so maybe just take them now?" "Tubbo," Wilbur said, cutting the boy off. "We know how long it takes for them to kick in. Don't worry about us." Tubbo's jaw clenched at this, and he stared at the two of them for a moment, like he wanted to argue. After a few seconds, though, he sighed and dropped his shoulders. Fine. Just make sure to take them so you guys get some sleep. With that, he turned to head back to the door. There was a certain hesitance in his steps, though. Like he didn't want to leave, but knew he had no other choice. He paused at the doorway. "Night, guys," he called out softly. "Night, Tubbo," Wilbur waved. "Good night to a bitch," Tommy said, his voice muffled by Wilbur's shirt. Wilbur didn't miss the way Tubbo squeezed his eyes shut at that, almost like he was trying to keep himself from flinching. But he didn't say anything more, and with one last look at the two of them, shut the door behind him. The lights dimmed automatically, and Wilbur glanced out the window at the permanent twilight sky, the trees now standing almost perfectly still for the first time in weeks. There was no constant hum from the screaming wind, and it made something ache in Wilbur's chest. "I don't want to take the sleeping pills," Tommy mumbled into Wilbur's shirt. "They make me all groggy in the morning." "Do you think you'll be able to sleep without them?" Wilbur asked, rubbing small circles into Tommy's shoulders. "I will if you sing to me." Wilbur snorted. "So that's why you wanted to sleep with me tonight. You just wanted to use me for my voice." Surprisingly, instead of teasing him like he expected, Tommy softly said, "It's just too quiet when the wind dies down. And when you sing, all the loud shit in my head just goes away." Warmth bloomed in Wilbur's chest at this, and he squeezed the arms he had around Tommy's shoulders just a bit tighter. That would probably be because siren singing is known to calm people down and draw them in. "No, I think it's just because you're a really good singer," Tommy huffed, his eyes fluttering shut. Despite the unease that had made itself a home in Wilbur's chest and under his skin because of the lack of wind outside the window, he found himself smiling at Tommy's comment. Holding on to the warmth Tommy's words had given him, Wilbur opened his mouth and began to sing. The song Wilbur sang wasn't in common. It was a song written in Old Thamesian, one that sirens had sung lullabies to children for hundreds of years. Had sung as lullabies to children for hundreds of years. Wilbur had faint memories of his mother singing it to him when he was little, and when he found out that Tommy didn't have those same memories since he'd been so young when she died, he begged Nikki to teach him all the words so he could sing it to Tommy in her place. Sorry, that's just sorry. Sorry. I cannot describe the feelings that I have right now. Because despite Tommy being the golden child of Eldingvegr, having the respect of the entire royal court and a bright future ahead of him as the king, Wilbur would always have one thing Tommy did not: memories of their mother. And that was the one thing Wilbur thought Tommy deserved more than anything. So he did what he could. He tried to teach Tommy how to use his voice, and he sang him the same lullabies their mother sang to him. Even though Tommy didn't talk about either of his parents often, Wilbur could tell he was grateful for the lullabies all the same. Wilbur sang and sang and sang, watching the faint stars twinkle in the dusty pink sky outside the window. Slowly, Tommy's breathing evened out, and it wasn't long before there was light snoring rumbling against Wilbur's chest. Once he finished the song, Wilbur tucked the blankets up a little further on Tommy's back. Even though the calming effect of a siren singing didn't work on the singer themselves, Wilbur still found himself feeling far more relaxed than he had before. Sinking back into the mattress, Wilbur's eyes fluttered shut, with Tommy's soft breathing echoing in his ears. He felt himself drift off to sleep. The sound of an explosion woke Wilbur up. Bolting upright in the bed, Tommy yelped at the sudden movement. "What the fuck, Wilbur?" he yelled, grabbing his nose where Wilbur had accidentally hit it. Wilbur didn't respond to Tommy. His eyes were on the window, gaze searching for the source of the explosion. When he found what he was looking for, his heart dropped into his stomach. "Oh my God," Wilbur whispered, blood turning to ice in his veins. What's... Tommy cut himself off when he spotted it as well. Oh, fuck. Not much had changed since Wilbur had fallen asleep. The sky was still pink, the stars were still barely visible, and the wind hadn't picked back up again. But actually, the sky had changed, because although the stars were barely visible, Wilbur could see the giant armada of battleships sitting in their sky as clear as day, and in case there was any doubt for what their intentions were, another missile shot out from one of the ships, causing the tree Wilbur had been staring at earlier to explode into 1,000 different pieces. They were under attack. Huh, what's world forgetting by the world forgot? I'll have to check that out sometime. Alright. Oof. I think that is going to be my stream. Let's pull up this and let's see, who is live? Who shall I raid? I haven't really watched their streams this much, but let's see what's going on here. Okay. Raid. Alright. It looks like she's doing marbles. Everyone join the raid! Thank you guys so much for watching my stream. It really means a lot, especially since I haven't streamed in like a week. Much better streams are going to be happening in the future because I'm finally going to get a PC. Especially considering the fact that, depending on how expensive it is, it's either going to be both or just one. I did say on Twitter that once I get my PC, the first thing I'm streaming is Monster Prom. So, you guys keep an eye out for that. I won't, depending on, I don't know if I probably won't stream tomorrow, and I probably won't stream Monday. Can't stream Tuesday. So the next stream is probably going to be on Wednesday. That's definitely when I'll have my PC set up, hopefully by then. But thank you guys for watching. If you're new to my channel and you enjoy my content, be sure to drop a follow, because at 150 I'm going to be doing an entire stream in a British accent. If you want to see that, be sure to keep updated. Click !! socials if you want to see all my other socials, like my Twitter and stuff. But, okay, raid is happening soon. Bye!